Welcome, I am Mr. Clock, the creator of the Arma 3 Object Builder add-on for Blender. In this video, I would like to showcase how to set up and work with proxies in Blender. To demonstrate how to set up a model with proxies properly, I took the liberty and imported an older model of mine, which is a rifle from the movie Oblivion. And we will go ahead and set this up with a few attachment proxies. So the first thing we see is that it has a scope attached to it and also a magazine. But potentially we want this scope to be detachable. Also, we may want to have the magazine exchangeable with proxied magazines, and also we probably want to have a muzzle flash for this weapon. So for all this to work, we will need proxies. So let's start with the first one, which is probably the simplest, is to have a muzzle flash, which will only require us to add a single proxy to the object. The easiest to position a proxy is by using the 3D cursor. So in this case, I will go ahead and move the 3D cursor to the middle of the muzzle of the weapon, and I will go to the add menu and add an Arma 3 proxy, and we can see that it created a giant triangle at the 3D cursor location, and I will move this triangle a bit inwards because this is roughly how the muzzle flashes are created. And so currently this proxy, as the name says, this is an unknown proxy. It doesn't point to anything, it's just a giant triangle practically. So we will have to set a proxy path. So I will go and navigate to the P drive Arma 3 and look for the Arma MX weapon muzzle flash, because this rifle is very similar to that platform. This should be in proxies, muzzle flash, and then we are looking for rifle MX25. So if we accept this path, this will paste the selected path here, and now it will export properly and will look good in Object Builder. So this is the easy part. This is how we can add proxies. As you can see, the proxy is a separate object. It has its own oriented local coordinate system, so it is relatively easy to manipulate, rotate proxies this way. They are parented to the object under which they are created. So they are separate objects, but they are parented. If we move the parent object, we move the proxy as well. But this is a quirk of Blender. If we hide, for example, the parent object, it doesn't hide the proxy. So if we, or the children. So if we want to hide both, we have to hold Shift and then click, and that will hide everything below as well, and Shift click to reveal back again. So this way we have our first proxy in the model. We can also, if you go to LOD properties, I enabled this as a LOD already, and if you go to proxy access, we can see that it has the proxy assigned to the model with the proper path and index. Okay, so the next thing is to go ahead and separate the optic from the rifle. Now, to do this, you obviously have to select the parts that you want to separate, and I will use the material on the rifle and go ahead and select the scope and separate by selection. And now this created a new object, but ideally we don't want this object to be positioned like this, right? We want it to have a center somewhere like this, and then we want to move the proxy in the proper place so that potentially other proxied scopes or site attachments can be used as well. So next thing you want to do is create a new proxy under the weapon. This will again create it at the 3D cursor, but we can move it wherever we like. So I will move it somewhere here, for example, right? And then what I will go ahead and do is move the 3D cursor to this object and then go and do a origin, set origin, and set origin to 3D cursor. And then what I will do is I will simply discard the location of the scope, so this moves it back into the center. And this way the object will be oriented like we want when the proxy is loaded onto the weapon. Now the last thing that's missing, this is now a separate object, we would need to export this as a separate P3D. The last thing missing from the proxy is to actually set the proper proxy path. So in this case we don't want to proxy to this model specifically, we want to point to the Arma 3 attachment proxy slot. So this should be A3 data F proxies and weapon slots, and this is the top slot. So this way this is now a scope attachment point. And then we can do a very similar thing with the magazine. So I will go ahead and select the magazine here. I will separate this out. I will create a new proxy for the weapon, which is now in the same place as the scope, but I select it, move it down somewhere close to the chamber, probably like here, move the 3D cursor to that place, set the origin to 3D cursor, and discard the location of the magazine. So this way, this is how we would export this to the P3D, and then this is how we would export the scope. And when all this goes together with the proper proxy placement, we can have a functioning weapon. The last thing here is that we also have to point to the magazine proxy. So this should be A3 data F proxies, weapon slots, magazine slot. And now this is a proxy magazine. If we wanted to have more attachments like a bipod, side mounted light, and the muzzle device, we can add more proxies to the object. Proxies can also be rotated, and that will influence how the linked object is oriented in game. So if we rotate it this way, the muzzle flash would be pointing sideways to the left of the to the right of the rifle barrel. So be mindful of that. And then finally, since we are done with this, what we can do is we have these hidden, and if we export the model to our folder, we can see that it exported one LOD, and if you look at the model in Object Builder, you can actually see the proxies that we set up. We have the muzzle flash, we have the magazine and the top proxies, and if we go into Buldozer, we should actually see the muzzle flash as we expected. If we look closely, you can see that the muzzle flash is actually present on the weapon. So I hope you will find this little introduction useful. I will make a separate video about some of the utility tools for manipulating proxies. If you have any suggestions or you found any issues with this proxy setup process, do let me know through GitHub. Thank you.